everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my 2021 stats video. So today, as of December 17th, this is what my stats are. This is how many books I've read. This is all the little nitty-gritty bits of everything that I've read this year so far. Usually I like leaving this further into the end of the year, but we're just gonna have to make do with the 17th of December. If anything changes exponentially before I post this video, I will put it on the screen when I talk about each stat, but for now, we're just gonna dive into it. We're gonna dive in and everything is going to be great. So I have my bullet journal here in front of me, and I'm gonna bring up my Compile graph that I have on my computer, and we're just gonna get into it. First and foremost, this year so far, I have read 134 books. I am currently like this close to finishing another one, and I have a bunch of them on the go. So by the end of the year, I'm hoping to at least hit 140, but I will let you know on the screen if that number has changed at all. It's 134 books, which is great. My reading goal of the year, my Goodreads reading goal, was 100, which I beat back in the summer. Each month, what did I read each month? So in the month of January, I read 10 books. In February, I read 10 books. March, also 10 books, so it was very even across those 3 months. And then in April, I read 12. May, I read 17. And then in June, I had my best reading month with 20 books, which is insanity because I don't know how I got there. July, I read 13. August, 12. September, I read 15. Again, I don't know how I did that. October, I read 12. November, I read 9. And December so far, I've read 3. So the end of the year has been number-wise, like November, December has been the worst reading month for me. Usually by now, which is over halfway through the month, I have read like 6, 7 books, maybe upwards of 10, especially in those months that I read like 17 to 20 books. That's okay though, because in November, I moved to my new place, which is where I currently am, and I have been settling in for the past little bit. Or I guess not November. I bought the place in November and then did a whole bunch of work on it for the last half of November and then moved in right at the beginning of December, and that's where I've been since. Alas, that is just, that's how life goes. C'est la vie, right? This year I also DNF'd 9 books, which I think is my highest number of DNFs ever. I don't remember them all, but I do remember the ones from this half of the year because I have my bullet journal with me. So this half of the year, I DNF'd Burning Roses in August. I DNF'd The Road Trip tentatively in September because I just wasn't getting around to it. I DNF'd Hench in September as well, and The Beholder, and Three Dark Crowns, all in September. Lots of DNFs in September. And then I DNF'd The Maidens in October, and The Ones We're Meant to Find in November. So that's good. And I might have another DNF coming around. Right now I just have to decide whether or not I want to actually commit to a DNF with this book, but that is Amari and the Night Brothers. I don't remember my other DNFs though, which is fun. Let me actually go scroll through my Compile and I will see what I DNF'd from the beginning of the year. So my first DNF of the year was Witches Steeped in Gold. That one I was just having a hell of a time with. And then I also decided to officially call it quits on my read of The Count of Monte Cristo, which I got halfway through, which is insane because The Count of Monte Cristo is over 1,000 pages. And I got halfway through and I said, you know what? No, I've been reading this for like a year. We're gonna not. So really, this beginning of this year, I DNF'd another one that I don't think I marked properly in here, but I can't remember what it was called. So it was really only like 3 in the first half of the year and then 6 in the last half of the year, possibly 7. So editing Jen popping in, I have actually DNF'd another 2 books since filming this video. The last half of this year I've just been kind of ruthless with my reading. If I'm not super enjoying it, I'm just getting it off my reading list and just not continuing with the book. So I have now officially DNF'd Amari and the Night Brothers, which I might go back to eventually physically. And then I also just DNF'd God of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia because I just could not get behind the writing. So another 2 DNFs added to this list. It's been an interesting reading year for me, 2021. If you guys have been around for a while, you'll know that like nothing was hitting the mark at the beginning of the year. I was looking back through my Compile ratings and everything because I was trying to do math and everything. interesting. I have like only 17 5-star books from this year, and a fair number of them are rereads of mine, which is insanity because even though I changed my rating system this year into Copile, which did make me more analytical of what I was reading, nothing was really hitting that favorites mark like it did in 2020. I will have a video going up of my almost favorites, and then of course of my top 10 favorites if they are not up already. Yes, so let's actually talk about the ratings now. So in Copile, it only breaks it down into 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-star reads, but I actually break everything down in 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, etc. kind of ratings myself. So I don't actually have my other bullet journal with me, which is my first half of the year bullet journal. I believe I left it at home, unless, no, do I? I might. I do! This is gonna make this video so much easier now. Oh my gosh. Okay. Actually, let me just take a second and I'm gonna total everything and I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. So, in total this year, let's break it down. I've had only 1 1-star. I've had only 1 1.5 star. I've only had another 1 2-star. So those, I guess, I didn't really have that bad of a year, but that's because usually, I think I was just kind of sitting here going, why do I have three 1-stars and 3 2-stars on the Copile system? And that's because Copile asks you to fill in ratings for each of them for DNFs as well. So those are my DNFs and the 1.5 star as well. They kind of fit in there. So yeah, only 3 of my books were lower than a 2.5 star this year, which isn't that bad. Now that I'm like sitting here, maybe this rating year wasn't actually that terrible. It was just mediocre. I have 7 2.5 stars, 14 3 stars, 30 3.5 stars, 35 4 stars, 27 4.5 stars, and finally 17 5 stars, and then 1 book without a rating, which was a nonfiction that I read this year. The way that's how I break down my ratings, but then in Copile, it only breaks down in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stars. So in Copile, I have 3 1 stars, 3 2 stars, 22 3 stars, 92 4 stars, and 17 5 stars. So that one doesn't change. But that's because in the 3-star and in the 4-star, it depends on how low or how high it is in the numbers, and that's how I dedicate the half stars to. So a lot of those 4 stars are 3.5s or 4.5s. So it's kind of split amongst a range. My average rating this year via Copile was 3.85 stars. So let me calculate how much it is in my actual rating. Wow. Oh my God, that's crazy. So my average rating with all of those little itty bitty changes only changes it by a 0.01 decimal point. So my average rating this year is 3.84 stars, which is crazy and actually pretty good when you think about it that way. So there you go. All sorts of math happening here on Jen's bookshelf. It's a good time. The most read genre of mine, let's see if y'all can guess. I can hear it from here. It's fantasy, baby! With 45.5% of the books that I read were fantasy. I read 65 books that I cataloged as fantasy this year, which is a lot of fantasy books, and I love it. And I want to make that number just keep going up and up and up. And surprisingly, my second biggest read genre was sci-fi this year. I honestly cannot believe it. I read 23 sci-fi books this year. That is such a jump from last year, my guys. I am so proud of myself because this was a genre that I was so scared of before 2021. I still am intimidated by it, but I am more than willing to dive into it now and just keep going with this, just the incredible genre that is sci-fi. So yeah, 16.1% of all my books were sci-fi books. And then the next biggest genre was contemporary books I read 11 this year, and that was 7.7% of all my books. And then every other genre, because apparently I read in 19 different genres this year. Every other one had less than 10 books in total in. Wow, that's an incredible number. I am so happy that fantasy and sci-fi were my top genres this year. That's incredible. And I want to keep it that way. I want to keep it that way, I think. Oh, I totally forgot to mention, as of right now, I have read 52,032 pages this year. And I do plan on reading even more, so I will put on the screen right before I am to upload this and put it on the internet how many pages I have now read in 2021, because I know it's going to go up as soon as I actually finish books and everything. So we shall see, because I do have, of course, The Dragon Reborn, which is over on that side. And let me see if I can... The Dragon Reborn on that side, which I'm halfway through, which isn't counted into this. I also have Jade War, which isn't counted into this, so this is just hundreds and hundreds of pages that I'm going to be adding into this number, so very exciting. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of what these books were about. So in the age categories, I read 40 YA books, so that is across genres. I read 85 adult, which is just magical number to me because I used to read so much YA and I'm so tired of YA now, so it's like I'm really happy that I'm branching out with adult books. I read 17 middle grade and 1 new adult, but I feel like I could have read probably more this year that I could have probably counted as new adult, but new adult is such a hard category to pin down, so that one probably could go into the adult category and make it 86 adult and then ignore a new adult, but those are those numbers. So another thing that the Compile graph system does is it calculates your percentage of like readership and what books represent. It was a category that G from Book Roast, who created this Compile system and the graph that I used all year, it's a category that she implemented that would calculate the percentages of books that you read that had 2S LGBTQIA plus representation in and what didn't. And then it also had a specific spot where you could like categorize what exactly was represented in the books, like what kind of queerness was represented, whether it was multiple or specifics like sapphic or whatever. So this year, 54% of my books that I read this year had some kind of representation in them. Now, I'm very happy with this number, but I also want to make this even bigger next year because I feel like the most incredible books that you can read are the ones that are so incredibly diverse with sexualities and ethnicities and just kind of people that you get in your books. So I want to keep growing this 54% number of all of the books that I read. 17.5% of the books had the main character who was queer, and then 37.1% was that it was just present in the narrative. It wasn't necessarily the main character. In that 54.6%, the breakdown of all of those queer identities was nuts. Looking at the graph, it hurts my eyes. But the biggest ones that I will mention, I have 26.6% of them were unspecified. So if it wasn't blatantly said in the text as bisexual or lesbian or gay, like if it wasn't blatantly said that the person identified as this and it was just like I could assume what they were, I put it as unspecified because I didn't want to read an identity onto it that wasn't there, which is fine. I love that it was queer but unspecified because then I could just, you know, it's fine. It's fine. We don't have to put labels on everything. 31.6% of all the books, there were multiple queer identities in them as well, not just one specific one. And then of course, for example, like 12.7% of them were female-female romances and 16.5% of them were male-male romances. And there was just a ton of other smaller percentages that I won't go into today, but I thought that was really interesting to see the breakdown of queer identities in my reading this year. And I just want to read more and more and more diversely as 2022 rolls around because I find those books the most interesting and they're just the most fun, I think. 9.8% of my books were rereads, which is very interesting to me. So I reread 14 books this year that I had read previously, which is great. I love rereading books because it's just returning to a world that you absolutely love. My most notable reread were my Percy Jackson books, which are up yonder, way up there. And of course, the Heroes of Olympus books as well. 59.4% of my books were series that I read this year, and 40.6% of them were standalones. So if you want to know more about my series breakdown and all of the series that I read this year, which ones I started, which ones were brand new, how many I finished, and that kind of a thing, I have an entire video out dedicated to it, and it is the day one of Jennsmas. So I will leave that tagged down below for you guys to go watch if you want to know more about all the series that I read this year. It's so many. It's so many, it's ridiculous. We're gonna get into author breakdown now because this is the spot where I want to change the most going into 2022. And I know this is not my goals video. I will talk about this more in my reading goals video, which is going to go up next. I believe it's my next one. This year in my author breakdown, I only read 33.6% of BIPOC authors, which is a number that I fought with all year. I kept wanting to adjust it and bring it over that 35% mark. I think what really hurt me was the amount of Rick Riordan books I read this year because Rick, as we know, is a white man and I read so many of his books this year. I read 15 of his books, and I started reading The Wheel of Time this year, and I did read a few classics, and all the classics that I own, like Jane Austen and stuff, those are by white people. So next year in 2022, I want to make that number so much bigger. I want to make that percentage so much bigger because that is a ridiculously low number. Of the BIPOC authors that I did read, 32.6% of them were Black, 39.1% of them were Asian, and 8.7% of the books that I read were by Indigenous authors. So next year, I want to make those numbers explode more. I want to read more diversely, as I keep saying, and I specifically want to read more Canadian Indigenous authors as well. I really shit the bed with that this year. I just need to keep looking for books. I just need to actively go out and fill my TBR with BIPOC authors. That's just what I need to do. So I'm going to hold myself accountable for next year for sure. All right, more broadly, this year, 59.4% of the authors that I read were women, which is incredible. And I want to keep that number really high because I love reading women authors. We love to see it. And 35% were men, and there were 3.5% of multiple authors, and then 2.1% of non-binary and trans authors as well. So in the same vein as what I talked about before, I want to actually make a point of, in 2022, actually keeping track of which authors I read are queer and are in that category. In the Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA+ category, I want to keep track of that as well because I want to be supporting queer authors. I also want to be supporting disabled authors, and I want to be reading more disabled representation books. So if you guys have any recommendations for that, because I don't know, I haven't heard like anything at all about disabled authors and disabled stories with good representation. So that's something that I really want to change. I want to incorporate more of my reading for that. I think the only one that I can think about is Disfigured by the same author of The Centaur's Wife. Our main character in this is disabled, as well as our author is disabled in here. So this is probably the only book that I did read this year that is by a disabled author, which is so terrible of me to say because that is such an underrepresented category. So 2022, we're changing it up. We're reading more diversely, and we're adding more authors to my list that aren't of the patriarchal norm. You know? And finally, the amount of books that I read of authors who were American is absolutely ridiculous. Like, looking at my graph hurts a little bit because it is 69.9% of the books that I read were by American authors, which is insanity. And the second biggest is actually tied for second is Canadian and British authors, and both of those I only read 16 books each in. And you wanna know how many American authors I read? 100. So 100 of the books that I read were by American authors, which is insanity. So I want to be reading more Canadian authors because holy man, I need to support Canadian authors because I am Canadian and I want to be supporting people from around the world as well. So goodness me, 2022, I need to change my reading. I need to read more diversely. I need to read more worldwide, and I just need to find books that bring me joy. Bring me joy. Because this year, I feel, was just a mediocre reading year. This is to say, my stats video is always just to say, like, this is how my reading year went, and this is kind of how I want to go forward. So I'm going to stop talking about my goals because that is for my reading goal video. But you hear it here first, folks. Next year, 2022, I am changing my reading, and I'm going to make it just much more wonderful for myself. All right, I'm back. I totally forgot to film like the most important part of this video. Hi, hello. We're back to chat about my physical TBR. At the beginning of this year, I had 172 unread books on my physical TBR. And 2021 has been a year of unhauling for me. And I'm gonna unhaul a bunch more now because if you guys saw my bookshelf tour featuring this baby behind me, I honestly can't fit any more books on my shelves. So I have been getting rid of a lot of them. Yeah, at the beginning of the year, I had 172 unread books. But when I did my I've read 50 books so far this year, let's chat video, which I talk about my like halfway through my reading goal stats and kind of stuff like that, I had grown that TBR by 4 books because I had hauled many, many books at that point and hadn't read enough of my physical TBR. So knowing that, I had 176 books on my physical TBR in May. and it is now December, and I have done so many unhauls. It was one of those things where I would just rip books off my shelves and just get rid of them. I have kept track in my bullet journal of the books that I have hauled this year, which is an obscene amount of books. Let me tell you right now. From my previous bullet journal, the list started at 64. This year, in total, I hauled brand new books to my shelves. I hauled 109. So far. I say so far because it is Christmas season and I know my friends and they know me and all I ever want is books. So there's probably going to be a few more, but that's okay because I think I've shrunk my physical TBR enough. Now, out of the ones that I have hauled, let me quickly count how many because I also kept track of them in my old bullet journal as well, all the books that I hauled, and I also kept track next to them whether or not I had read them or not as I go through them and read them. So first, let me just say, I have also unhauled a few of them as I've gotten them. Okay, so I have unhauled 3 books from my haul of 109 this year. So out of all 106 books that I hauled this year, let me see how many I've read. All right, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. And I found another one that I actually unhauled. So I unhauled 4. So out of the 105 books that I've added to my shelves that I still have, nope, I unhauled another one. Out of the 104 books that I have hauled this year, I have read 66 of them. Now, I didn't read all of them this year because there are some of them that I added to my shelves that I had already previously read, like the entire Percy Jackson series when I bought the beautiful nerdy ink covers that you can see way up there. Now comes the time that I have to count all the books that I have not read on my new shelves. So let's do it. My guys, you're never gonna believe it. Out of all the books that I own, which I don't actually know the number, I should count that too one day, I have 111 physical books on my TBR that I have not read. 111! And I'm currently more than halfway through 2 of those, started 3rd. So as of December 17th, 2021, I have 111 unread books on my physical TBR. I went from 176 unread books in May, hauling 104 books, to shrinking my TBR to 111. Wow. The wonders of unhauling. Truly, because I don't know how many physical books I've read this year. This half of the year, starting in July, I read 49 physical books and physical books off my physical TBR, and it was about the same in the first half of 2021. Let me see, 47 in the first half of the year, and however many I just said in the second half of the year. So y'all, that means I've unhauled like hundreds of books throughout the year, which is insanity. But I guess this just proves that when you move and when you have to downsize the amount of books that you have, even though you still own a crazy amount of books, the numbers will change. And so going into 2022, I want to make sure that that number stays low, and maybe we can get it below 100. That would be so cool. Having a TBR that's smaller than 100 books? Hell yeah to that. Now we are officially done. So I will cut back to previous me who finished out this video. I think that brings us to the end. That is all that I really wanted to talk about for the stats video. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below how many books you read this year, because this is I love finding out how many books people have read this year and how many they really enjoyed. If you know what your average rating was, please let me know as well, because I would love to know. I will catch you in another video very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.